welcome everyone. I'm going to be talking about basically just how to make a website from scratch. In this case, just one web page, but I wanted to kind of showcase a few of the main things that you might want to consider when working in like a pretty typical dev environment, which is to say you were given a Figma file. In this case, this is something that I just mocked up for this. It's a single page site. I don't know if you can see that super well. Let me put this on its own page for just a second. It's just a single page site for like a recipe blog. You might think of it something like that. And it's super simple. We just have like a title, a logo, a couple of buttons, and then just like the recipe. And what I wanted to show off first was kind of how you might first approach the initial step, which is to create the skeleton, the HTML. And that would be to think about like how to separate out all these elements. And so like what are some boxes that you might draw around, you know, any of these things that you might say, this is one thing, this is like one div, this is like an H tag, this is, does anyone want to? The what? Well, sure, but before even getting to like the specifics, what's like, can you just like point me to one element that I would like, actually, in fact, let me do that real quick. If I do this and I get, instead of a fill, I put a stroke on here. So what is like something that I would use this for? What could I like draw a box around that's like, oh, this is something to pay attention to? Okay, yeah. Sure, yeah. So if I put a box around the two buttons, then obviously what else would I want to put a box around? Okay, yeah. So what are the buttons in? The header? Okay, so we could put in like something like that. And we could, since that's being covered, we could also put in our logo. That's like another element to think of. And I think that breaking down a web page into these boxes is really useful. And what I've already done on this specifically, if I just hide these rectangles I've already made and make, let's see, where is it? So this is how I might like draw a box around every single element on the page. And this will be useful because right now what we're going to do is like at least kind of start thinking about how to draw up the HTML from scratch. So what's like, let me just go to our HTML. This is the HTML we're starting with, by the way. We just got a hello world with nothing else in it. What's like the first thing that we might start with? Title? Yeah, we could put the title, or the title, excuse me. So what was the title? Yeah. So I'm just going to copy that and put it right there. Okay, in terms of the body itself, what might we put in there from here? What's like one kind of section? Yeah, the header. So we could put a header tag, which is just a semantic version of a div. What else might we put? Yeah, all the instructions. So that could go, depending on how we want to break that out, I might put it into, I might use something like a main, which is, again, just like another semantic version of a div tag. And then within that, we could put we could put the div that might say the cooking instructions, and then we might have another div for the ingredients. So let's try doing that. The instructions, and then the ingredients seems like a pretty reasonable class to make. And just for, so that we kind of know what's going on, I'm going to put those names in here. So this is kind of our page structure so far. It's like pretty minimal, but we have something going on. So what might I do to like really get the like sizing on these? Use a what? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now we're just talking about like the boxes. We could also put like the header itself. Is that what you're talking about? That's actually a good point. We should probably put our header in there itself. So since that is the most important thing on the page, we could put something like an H1 tag. And so how's that look? Yeah. And then how about the other information? How might we structure, say, the instructions? For maybe like the cooking instructions part, we could do that. Maybe do an H2 for, in fact, let's do H2, and let's do cooking instructions there, and then we could also do an H2 for our ingredients. So now it looks something more like that. What about the actual steps? Like this part, what might each of these elements be? So keep in mind that there's like this numbering system that we have going on. Yeah, we could do a list. So what kind of list? Yeah, an ordered list. So that would be under the instructions. We could have our OL. And in that, we could have a list item. And in that list item, we could put, so let's see. First, let's put in this text, just as an example. And, oops, let's grab this and put that in like a P tag or something. How's that looking? Awesome. Cool. And what you can do, if you have access to a Figma file, you could maybe go through each of these and copy just like all the relevant pieces with shift clicking. And then we could put all that into our HTML here. So that would go like that. So right now it's just like totally unstyled, so we would need to add in our styling. And I think that what I'm going to do instead of doing that is just go to the complete version that I have here, which will also have a span for each of the steps. So step 1, and kind of do something like that. So let's go to that HTML and just copy those to see how it would look. Oops, I think I missed one. Okay, so now we have all the steps in here. We'll get to this, like how it has one dot step one in a second. That's going to come with the styling. But what about with the ingredients? We could do the same thing, but how might it be a little bit different? If we used an OL for, yeah, we could do a UL. And let's see, that's going to be under here. We just set up a DUL, and it's the same basic idea. We're just using list items, maybe like a P tag, or it doesn't even really need a P tag in this case because it's not separating out. There's not like multiple things per entry, so we could just have it text by itself. Did I save that? Why is that not updating? Oh, I put it in the wrong place. That would be why. There we go. So now we have this, and we have the little bullet there, and there's, I think this is maybe a decent time that I could start talking about the CSS. And in order to do that, I am going to do the same idea. I'm going to copy just all the HTML from this other page, because I don't want to just build. You guys have gone over some HTML. I'm just going to see how this looks with HTML and no CSS applied. So right now it looks like this. We have a logo here that you can't really see because it's on white. We have a checkbox, which I can go over a little bit if you all want me to. We have cooking instructions, which we just went over, and then we had the ingredients. And right now, what we really want to do is to start styling this so it looks more like our mock. So what's something that we could try styling to begin with? The what? The columns? Okay, great. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, obviously the very first thing that we need to do is to actually just make a CSS file. Or we do, but it doesn't have anything in it. So what we could do is to look at our HTML and see how we want to differentiate these. We have our ingredients, which is going to be, it's going to have this ingredients tag, and then we're also going to have this instructions tag. And they're both going to be wrapped in this recipe div. So we might target the recipe div. Oops. And how might we differentiate, what kind of display style would we put on that so that we can, right now they're on top of each other, the cooking instructions and the ingredients. How might we do this so that they're next to each other? The what? A grid? Okay. So, display grid. What else do we need if we're using grid? They both do, yeah. And in fact, I used grid on my example, so I'm glad that you said that. But right now, that shouldn't do anything. Grid by itself is not going to, unlike Flexbox, which has a lot of inherent properties when you just specify flex. If you specify grid, nothing's going to happen. You need to specify something else. Does anyone know the specific selector? Yeah. Okay, and so the way that grid template columns work, if any of y'all are not familiar, is that it will let you specify how big you want each column. And the way it does it is you specify the first column, then the second column, then the third column, and so on and so forth, as many columns as you want. So if you only specify one column, there will be one column. So that's the default. You probably wouldn't want to do that. If you want to specify two columns and you want them to be the same size, you usually use this FR unit. That's, I think, specific to grid, maybe a few other cases, but that should make it to where they're taking up equal space. In this case, they don't quite take up exactly equal space. So maybe this one takes up, how much would you say, like 3/5 of it, and this is like 2/5 of it? How might we do that? Does anyone have? Yeah, exactly. If we do 3 and 2, then now this one's taking up more space, and then this one is taking up a little bit of space. And let's see. One other thing that I wanted to really go over with the styling before like really filling out a bunch of it with the pre-configured CSS is to talk about variables, if any of you have not used it before. So to use variables in CSS, you're going to want to use this root prop or selector, and all that will do is let you specify, say, like, if we want a color that we might want to change later, but it's a color that we want to apply to everything or like many different things in our page, we might specify something like color primary dark. And we have those colors on the Figma here. So for instance, this, I would say, I usually follow this pattern where it's like color primary dark, color primary light, because I could call this maybe like dark green or light green or off-white, but they might be, in calling it a color like that, you might change the color down the road. What you want it to do is to keep the same function in your document. So like, let's say instead of a green color palette, I wanted more of like a red color palette, but there was still the standard light color, the standard dark color, maybe a standard secondary or accent color. That's why I typically like this primary dark versus like secondary dark or color accent, et cetera, et cetera. What we can do though, as I was blathering on, is to just set it here, and take note that you also need to use these, or I guess you don't need to. I'm actually not sure. I always see CSS variables with these two leading hyphens, and that's just the convention. I'm not. Okay, thank you. So the color primary dark, maybe the color primary light would be, what was this color? We have this FF, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also have this, I would call this either a secondary color or an accent color, depending on, you know, how I'm feeling that day. I'll call it secondary. All right, and you can kind of see that they're showing up there. And what we might want to do is to say, like, our body should have the background of, what was it, the dark color? Yes. So. Yes, okay. Okay, so yeah, not required, but convention, so might as well get used to using it that way. And to use a variable. So it's considered illegal. Illegal. Okay, so it's illegal to not use them. And if you actually want to utilize them, you'll want to use this var keyword, and that's anytime if your editor is configured right, then it should, like, once you start using var, it's like, oh, you're wanting to use your special custom variables, right? So already it's asking me like, oh, do you want to use color primary dark and yes, I do. I do in fact want to use color primary dark. And let's see. Oh, I did body the class, not body the. And there we go. So now we have this. It's also maybe good to set like a standard text color. So maybe just something like color var, and then instead of that, we would do the light version. And yeah, like it's still a ways off, but you can see how it's maybe starting to get towards this area. In fact, I think there's only one other thing that I wanted to highlight before just like dumping the rest of the CSS in, which would be the, let's see, how can I do this? I will dump the CSS in from here, because there's quite a bit. And put all that in, but I am going to go Okay, awesome. So this is like what the standard, this is what it would look like without the background image for the top. Because I think that that's kind of a nice example to look at. It's something that you're going to want to use pretty often in CSS. You're going to set a background image for like, you know, some hero image or for, you know, just a section. And what you want to do is to make sure that if you're like scaling your page, that it doesn't, you know, do something wonky. So in this case, have any of you used the background selector in CSS before? Okay, so it actually has like quite a few different properties associated with it. You can use the background property by itself, and it has like all these. You can do like no repeat. You use that? Okay. URL. So we have an image that we want to use. It's going to be this here in the images folder. It's this cover.jpg. So we'll just go to images. Oops, not important. We want to go to images/cover. And let's see what it looks like with just that. Okay, so that's, you know, something for sure. In fact, let me see, what is that? Super Y? Oh. Tile, and let me, yes, this is what I want. So you can see, like, for instance, it's still on that far right side. That's the end of the image, so it's like kind of ending weirdly, and you're not being able to see the rest of the. It looked like you wouldn't want that on a website. You wouldn't want to just like suddenly get to the end of your image and then there's no more of it. So to get rid of that, you might use, what is it, this cover? Is it just cover? Let's see if that works. Nope, that's not it. I'm not exactly sure how you do it when it's all broken out like that. So let me. The way I did it here is that I just set each of the individualized CSS selectors. So background image is its own selector, background size, background repeat, and background position. And if we just like copy those back in right here, you'll see that even if I go back here again, I make it really big or really small, it's going to like kind of center this, and that has to do with that cover setting and the center property on the background. But yeah, that's the basic styling. Does anyone have any questions on like any specific styling, how anything in particular was styled? Okay. Okay, sure. So the it's basically just a matter of what is stacked on top of each other. So the background color is being applied to the body, and the body is like the OG element on the page. There's the HTML tag, and then there's the body tag. And so anything on top of the body tag will be on top of it visually as well. So test what? Um, I yeah, actually, let me see if I can. Let's see, what would be the best way to do that? I could. You think just taking it out of the? Well, it's because the HTML is on top. So the HTML for this hero, the what I have. Yeah. I'm not sure if this will let me even. I don't think this will even let me do it. Did that even do anything? Maybe it just knows to actually include that in the body. I don't know for sure, but it's because the header that we have right here is rendering on top of the body, and the header's background image is that muffin picture. So it's like background, header with the muffin picture, and then anything you have on top of that would be rendered on top, and so on and so forth, if that makes sense. Great question. Is there any other things? Because next I want to talk about a cool little thing that, oh, did you have a question? Oh, sure, sure. So do you want to? Yes. Yes, so the main thing that is important for the, like before it said step one, and also over here we had bullets in our list. So that's actually a good thing to bring up because there's this list style type tag. Oops. Uh-oh, what have I done? Hello? Everything is just frozen. Oh boy. Let me just do that and then go back to where I was. Okay. Whew. Scary. Yes, this list style type is the important selector. If I remove this from here, you can see that it adds the 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what's important right here. And you can see the same thing is also applied here to this UL, the ingredients UL, and it adds the bullets. So if I add that tag in, and I keep it there, then we don't have the bullets. And that's nice for styling things exactly how you want it. Because you could maybe, I'm not sure if you're able to style like that 1, 2, 3 directly, but it's pretty easy to just say, hey, I don't want your default 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to do my own thing, which in this case is adding step 1, step 2, step 3 as span elements. Awesome. The last thing that I really wanted to talk about was adding the main.js file, because you might have noticed we had this little check box here, and right now it doesn't do anything. But I was thinking that something that we could implement is just like a super simple, we go through each of these ingredients and we can double it. We can extract this first value, and then we can double it and then put it back in place. So how have you all felt about learning the JavaScript today? Okay. Yeah? To actually use JavaScript, I don't know if you all have gone over that. I was there earlier, but I didn't quite see everything you're working on. But a pretty typical convention is to just put your JavaScript at the bottom of your HTML in this script tag. And that way, you might run into some issues if you put it at the top and you don't do some kind of preloading thing in your JavaScript. If you do it this way, in most cases, it should load in the right order, basically. Because you don't want your JavaScript loading before your page is there, because your JavaScript might be like, okay, I want to grab this thing from your page, which doesn't exist yet. So for our JS, actually, let's look at the thing that we want to target. And hopefully I've already laid it out here, the thing that we want to target in our list. Because instead of just saying 2 cups of flour, I've put a special span with its own class around each of the numbers, just so it's kind of easier. So do y'all know how you might target a specific element on your web page with JavaScript? Use what? Uh-huh. Yes. So let's see, I might need to review as well. Okay, yes. You'll want your document, everything related to your DOM, because you've heard that, right, the DOM. It's usually some sort of method that's attached to this document object. So you might grab the get, you could get element by ID, or you could get, what was it, query? You could use query selector. We might start out with getting actually, huh? Tag it? Yeah. We could use the span if we were to use query selector. And then basically all this will do is just find the element on your page that it uses the same sort of selection logic that your CSS uses. So if you want to target a class, then you would use dot some class. Or if you want to target a ID, then you would use the hashtag for some ID, and so on and so forth. So if we are wanting to target, in this case, we're wanting to target we're wanting to target 2 things. We're wanting to target this, because we want this to control the actual action of these numbers changing, and then we want to target the numbers so that we can change them. So for the proportions, we have this input with an ID. And so if we want to target that, we could use query selector, what was it? Proportions. Oops, if I can spell proportions. And we'll want to attach that to some kind of variable, maybe proportions toggle. Oops. And so now we have, basically, JavaScript knows about the existence. It's kind of weird when you're working with JavaScript on a web page, because you have to have JavaScript, like, you have to tell it that the things on your page exist. So, and you do that by using things like these query selectors or the get element by ID or whatever. So right now, our JavaScript knows that this proportions ID, which is attached to this little button right here, or this checkbox, it knows that it exists. So how do we make something like a checkbox do something? How do we make anything do something in JavaScript? What's like the what? A function? What are we giving a function? Yes. So like an event handler. We could have Event handler, and that's going to be, in this case, I think it would be a change. It's kind of annoying. You just have to like, obviously there's click, there's mouse over. In this case, the action that you would normally associate from an event handler with a toggle, like a checkbox, would be this change thing. So you might use that, and on that change, let's see, what is it? Add our function. And, okay, yes. So once we have activated that function, we're going to want to then target all of our ingredients here. And we can do the same thing. We want to query our document for what all these are. So if we do like a document.query, and we want to use query selector all, because unlike a regular query selector, the query selector will only grab the first element. So if I were to use query selector all, or query selector by itself, and then look for ingredients, let me actually type that out. Ingredients dot, what was the tag here? Ingredients amount. This right here, this amount class is what we're targeting. So if I were to target ingredients and then amount, it would only select the very first one. It would only select this one. But we want to select this one and this one and this one. And if you use query selector all, it will select all of them and it will put them into an array. So what we can do here is do const ingredients is equal to that. And then do something like ingredients dot for each. So for each ingredient, we're going to want to, what is it? We're going to want to, yes, define the amount as an actual, as the text content from that. Because when we're grabbing this element on this page, when we're grabbing this element, it's grabbing the entire thing. And that includes a lot of information aside from the thing we want, which in this case is just the 2, or just the 1, or just the, so on and so forth. So we're going to take, yes, parse float. We're going to want to take that, turn it into a number because it'll be text by default. We're going to want to take that ingredient dot text content, and then we can double it. If it's checked, I think I'm actually just going to copy this over real quick. It's probably a little bit easier to follow if you can actually see what's going on instead of me trying to remember how to write this. But basically, we're going to be parsing this text content, which is again like the 1 to 0.5, etc. It'll be text. We turn it into a number. Then we check if this is a special keyword that refers to whatever the thing that you're attaching your function to. So in this case, it's being attached to this toggle here at the beginning. So if this is checked, and that's a property of checkboxes. If this is checked, it will multiply it by 2, and if it is not checked, then it will divide it by 2, and then we will update the number. I'm sorry if that was a little bit complicated. I was trying to think of like a pretty simple, but things get really complicated really quickly in JavaScript. So if I click on this now, you can see these numbers will all update to be twice their original value. And then if we unclick it, then it will divide back to the original. And also, if we refresh the page, it should always refresh both to be the original value. This is the original value, and this checkbox is no longer checked. Does anyone have any questions about that? I can show this too. That's totally fair. I'm also going to share this repo if any of y'all want to like take a look at it, just with basically the starter version and the complete version. You can kind of like compare and contrast if you want. And also, if you ever need any help with like JavaScript or CSS, HTML, basic web dev stuff, you know, go ahead and ask me. But otherwise, if everyone feels pretty good about the rest of it, then I think I'm about done. I will get it to you somehow. I will ask Caroline, and you will get it. You will get the link to the repo. Okay. All right. Thank you.